Dr. Marina Petrov was having her morning coffee at the Institute for Nuclear Safety in Kiev when her assistant burst into her office with a laptop computer, his face pale with confusion and fear. It was March 15th, 2017, and what he was about to show her would challenge everything they thought they knew about the most dangerous place on Earth. "Professor, you need to see this," Pavel said, his voice shaking as he placed the laptop on her desk. The Google Street View images from Pripyat were updated yesterday. "Look at this." Marina leaned forward to examine the screen, expecting to see the familiar scenes of decay and abandonment that had defined the city for over 30 years. Instead, she found herself staring at something that should have been impossible. In the grainy digital image captured by Google's mapping car, 3 small figures could be clearly seen running between the concrete apartment buildings of Pripyat's residential district. The figures appeared to be children, their movements frozen in time by the camera's capture, seemingly engaged in some kind of game or chase. "This has to be a mistake," Marina whispered, adjusting her glasses to get a better look. "Some kind of digital error or manipulation." But Pavel shook his head grimly. "I thought so too. But look at this." He clicked to another image, taken from a different angle several blocks away. There they were again, the same small figures, now positioned near the famous Ferris wheel that had become a symbol of Pripyat's tragic abandonment. In this image, they appeared to be standing in a circle, as if playing some kind of children's game. Marina felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the March morning air filtering through her office windows. As one of Ukraine's leading experts on radiation exposure and the long-term effects of the Chernobyl disaster, she knew better than anyone that what she was looking at was absolutely impossible. The Chernobyl exclusion zone, established after the nuclear disaster of April 26, 1986, remained one of the most contaminated places on Earth. The explosion released into the atmosphere 400 times more radiation than was produced by the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, and nuclear fallout rained down far and wide across Europe. Shortly after the accident, the Soviets declared a 1,000 square kilometer exclusion zone uninhabitable, and mass evacuations began to take place. Nearly 3 decades later, the zone remains among the most contaminated places on Earth. The city of Pripyat, once home to nearly 50,000 people who worked at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, had been completely evacuated within 36 hours of the disaster. In 2017, more than 30 years later, radiation levels in many areas of the city were still deadly to unprotected humans. Although some of the radioactive isotopes released into the atmosphere still linger, such as strontium-90 and cesium-137, they are at tolerable exposure levels for limited periods of time. However, children would be particularly vulnerable to radiation exposure, and the idea of them playing unsupervised in the abandoned city was unthinkable. Marina immediately contacted Colonel Viktor Redchenko, the military commander responsible for security around the exclusion zone. The checkpoint system established around Pripyat was designed to prevent any unauthorized access to the contaminated area. Multiple rings of security, armed guards, radiation detection equipment, and regular patrols made illegal entry extremely difficult and dangerous. "Colonel, I need to know if there have been any breaches of the perimeter in the past month," Marina said over the secure phone line. "Specifically, any reports of civilians, especially children, inside the zone." Colonel Redchenko's response was immediate and definitive. "Absolutely not, Professor. We maintain constant surveillance of all access points. No unauthorized personnel have entered the zone. If children were somehow inside the perimeter, they would have been detected immediately by our radiation monitoring systems and patrol units." But the Google Street View images were undeniable evidence that something was happening inside Pripyat that the authorities didn't know about. Marina began researching the technical details of how Google's mapping cars operated and when they had conducted their survey of the exclusion zone. What she discovered added another layer to the mystery. Google had received special permission from the Ukrainian government to document the abandoned city as part of their comprehensive mapping project. The Street View car had been equipped with specialized radiation shielding and operated by a team wearing full protective gear. The survey had been conducted over several months in 2016 and early 2017, with images being processed and uploaded to the platform throughout that period. The strange thing was that the children appeared in images taken on different dates, sometimes months apart. In the February 2017 images, they appeared near the central square of Pripyat. In March, they had moved to the residential area near the famous abandoned amusement park. By April, the figures appeared to be positioned near the Pripyat River, almost 2 kilometers from their original location. Dr. Alexei Novak, a digital forensics expert from the University of Kiev, was brought in to analyze the images for signs of digital manipulation or computer-generated effects. After days of detailed analysis, his conclusion was disturbing. The images appeared to be genuine, unaltered photographs. Whatever the Google Street View car had captured, it was really there when the pictures were taken. The shadows are consistent with the lighting conditions, Dr. Novak explained to Marina and her team. The image compression and digital artifacts matched the rest of the Street View data. These figures were physically present when the photographs were captured. The question is, what are they? The breakthrough came when Marina decided to enhance and zoom in on the mysterious figures using advanced image processing software. What she discovered made her stomach turn with a mixture of relief and horror. The children weren't children at all. They were mannequins, child-sized dolls or display figures that had been deliberately positioned throughout the abandoned city. But this revelation only deepened the mystery. Who was placing these mannequins in Pripyat, and why? More importantly, how were they getting past the military security that surrounded the exclusion zone? The answer lay in a shadowy subculture that had emerged in the years following the Chernobyl disaster. They called themselves stalkers, named after the fictional characters in the popular video game series that was set in a post-apocalyptic version of the Chernobyl zone. According to Polsky, today about 200 stalkers are constantly coming to the zone. These urban explorers were obsessed with the abandoned city and willing to risk their lives to experience the eerie beauty of mankind's greatest nuclear disaster. In the distance, a dog barks, a sign of more stalkers. There are maybe 50 stalkers in Pripyat right now, Kirill tells us. The stalkers had developed sophisticated methods for entering the zone illegally, using everything from bribing guards to cutting through fences in remote areas where patrols were less frequent. Obviously, the desire to see with their own eyes has been pretty strong. Marina learned that among the stalker community, there was a disturbing trend of creating art installations within the abandoned city. Some stalkers would arrange objects, graffiti walls, or position mannequins in surreal scenes as a way of leaving their mark on the dead city. The child mannequins captured by Google Street View were apparently part of this underground art movement. Dr. Sarachin, an anthropologist from Columbia University who had studied the stalker phenomenon, explained the psychology behind these bizarre installations. For many stalkers, Pripyat represents the ultimate transgression, she said during a video conference with Marina's team. It's a place where normal rules don't apply, where death and danger create a heightened sense of reality. Placing child mannequins in this environment is a way of confronting the tragedy of the disaster, the innocence that was lost when families were forced to abandon their homes forever. The mannequins themselves told a story of careful planning and considerable risk. Each figure had to be carried into the zone illegally, positioned precisely for maximum visual impact, and then abandoned as evidence of the stalker's presence. The fact that they appeared in different locations over several months suggested that either the same person was repeatedly entering the zone to move them, or multiple stalkers were participating in the installation. Colonel Radchenko was not pleased when Marina informed him of her findings. The idea that people were regularly breaching the exclusion zone security was a source of professional embarrassment and genuine concern. These stalkers are not just risking their own lives, he explained. They're potentially contaminating themselves with radioactive materials and then carrying that contamination back to populated areas. It's a public health nightmare. The military response was swift and comprehensive. Patrols were increased, motion sensors were installed in areas where stalker activity was suspected, and a reward was offered for information leading to the arrest of unauthorized persons within the zone. But the stalkers had been playing this cat-and-mouse game for years, and they adapted quickly to the increased security measures. What Marina found most disturbing was the revelation that some stalkers were using the child mannequins as part of elaborate role-playing scenarios. Online forums dedicated to Chernobyl exploration contained discussions about bringing life back to Pripyat through these installations. Some posts described positioning the mannequins to recreate scenes of childhood play, as if trying to resurrect the normal family life that had been destroyed by the nuclear disaster. Dr. Yuri Bandashevsky, a physician who had spent decades studying the health effects of Chernobyl radiation exposure, found the mannequin installations particularly troubling. Children were among the most vulnerable victims of the Chernobyl disaster, he explained. Many developed thyroid cancer and other radiation-related illnesses. To use child figures as props in this radioactive wasteland shows a profound disconnect from the human tragedy that occurred here. Most domestic animals were removed from the exclusion zone, but horses left on an island in the Pripyat River 6 kilometers, for miles, from the power plant died when their thyroid glands were destroyed by radiation doses of 150 to 200 sieverts. The fact that animals couldn't survive in certain areas of the zone made the presence of the mannequins even more surreal. Artificial children playing in a place where real children would die from radiation exposure within days or weeks. The Google Street View images continued to be updated throughout 2017, and Marina's team monitored them carefully for further signs of stalker activity. The child mannequins appeared and disappeared like ghosts, sometimes positioned alone, sometimes in groups, always in locations that maximized their visibility to anyone viewing the area through satellite imagery or street-level photography. In June 2017, a new development shocked the research team. The mannequins began appearing with accessories, small toys, bicycles, and even what appeared to be a picnic setup complete with a blanket and toy tea set. The installations were becoming more elaborate and more disturbing, as if the stalkers were creating increasingly complex narratives around these artificial children. Dr. Chen suggested that the evolving installations might represent a form of grief processing. Pripyat was a young city, she explained. Most of the residents were young families with children. The stalkers might be trying to reconnect with that lost innocence, to imagine what life might have been like if the disaster hadn't occurred. But Marina saw something darker in the installations. The positioning of the mannequins often seemed to suggest movement, as if they were frozen in the middle of running or playing. Combined with their appearance in the Google Street View images, it created an unsettling illusion of life in a place where life was impossible. The mystery took an even stranger turn when Marina received a message from an anonymous email account. The sender claimed to be one of the stalkers responsible for the mannequin installations and offered to explain their motivations. Marina was skeptical, but the message contained details about the mannequins' positioning that hadn't been made public. "We are not vandals or thrill seekers," the message read. "We are artists trying to preserve the memory of what was lost." Pripyat was home to thousands of children who had to leave everything behind. Their toys, their playgrounds, their dreams all abandoned forever. Our installations are memorials to those children, a way of keeping their memory alive in a place that the world wants to forget. The anonymous stalker went on to explain that the mannequins were moved regularly to avoid detection by security patrols. Each installation was photographed extensively before being moved to a new location. The goal was to create a permanent record of Pripyat as a place where childhood should have flourished, but instead became a symbol of innocence destroyed by human error and technological hubris. Marina found herself conflicted by this explanation. While she couldn't condone the illegal activity or the risks involved, she understood the emotional appeal of trying to humanize the tragedy of Chernobyl. The sterile scientific discussions of radiation levels and contamination zones often overlook the personal devastation experienced by the families who had to abandon their lives overnight. About 1,000 of these returned unofficially to live within the contaminated zone. Most of those evacuated received radiation doses of less than 50 MSV, although a few received 100 MSV or more. Some residents had risked their health to return to their homes in the zone, showing the powerful emotional attachment people felt to places that were technically uninhabitable. The investigation into the Google Street View mannequins eventually reached an unsatisfying conclusion. Despite increased security measures and multiple arrests of stalkers attempting to enter the zone, the identity of the person or persons responsible for the child installations was never determined. The mannequins continued to appear and disappear throughout 2017 and into 2018, always positioned in ways that created maximum visual impact for anyone viewing Pripyat through online mapping services. In late 2018, the installations suddenly stopped. The last confirmed sighting was in November, when a single child mannequin was photographed near the Pripyat Cultural Center, positioned as if looking back toward the abandoned amusement park. After that, no new installations appeared, and the existing mannequins gradually disappeared, either removed by security forces or relocated by their mysterious creators. Dr. Marina Petrov continued to monitor the situation, but the trail had gone cold. The stalker who had contacted her anonymously never sent another message. The online forums where Chernobyl explorers shared their experiences became more carefully moderated, with explicit warnings against discussing illegal activities within the zone. Some researchers speculated that the person responsible for the installations had been caught or deterred by the increased security. Others believed they had simply moved on to other projects or lost interest in the artistic statement they were trying to make. A few suggested that the mannequin installations had been part of a larger art project or documentary that was never completed or publicly released. The Google Street View images remain online, archived as a strange digital monument to one of the most unusual mysteries of the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Visitors to the virtual Pripyat can still see some of the locations where the child mannequins once stood, though the figures themselves have long since vanished. For Marina, the case represented something larger than just an unusual security breach or artistic statement. It highlighted the ongoing psychological impact of the Chernobyl disaster on people who had never even lived in the affected area. The stalkers risking their lives to enter the zone, the anonymous artist positioning mannequins throughout the abandoned city, the online communities obsessed with documenting every detail of the disaster, all of them were seeking to understand and process one of humanity's greatest technological failures. The child mannequins in Pripyat served as a haunting reminder that the victims of Chernobyl weren't just statistics in a radiation exposure report. They were real families with real children who had real lives that were forever altered by events beyond their control. In a place where real children could no longer play, artificial children had taken their place, silent witnesses to the tragedy that transformed a thriving Soviet city into a radioactive ghost town. Today, some Google Maps users have just realized that they can explore inside reactor buildings at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant through Street View technology, but the mysterious child figures are no longer part of that virtual landscape. They exist now only in the archived images and in the memories of the researchers who tried to solve the mystery of their impossible presence in the world's most dangerous abandoned city. The truth behind the Google Street View mannequins may never be fully revealed, but their brief appearance in the digital record of Pripyat serves as a powerful reminder of the human cost of the Chernobyl disaster. In a place where life had become impossible, someone had tried to restore the illusion of childhood joy and innocence, even if only for the brief moment it took for a camera to capture their artificial presence in the ruins of a train that died on April 26, 1986.